Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and we are back with more ideas and opinions of Albert Einstein. And today we're going to finish this section on physics and reality. So let's go ahead and jump into this. This is part 6, the final part. I shall now show that, according to the general theory of relativity, there exist singularity-free solutions of field equations which can be interpreted as representing corpuscles. I restrict myself here to neutral particles because, in another recent publication in collaboration with Dr. Rosen, I have treated this question in detail, and because the essentials of the problem can be completely exhibited in this case. The gravitational field is entirely described in the tensor G something something. In the three index symbols, it is so hard to read that. There appear to be contravariant g to the mu v power, which are defined as the minors of the g mu v divided by the determinant g parenthesis equals the actual number of g a mu. In order that the r something shall be defined and finite, it is sufficient that there shall be in the neighborhood of every point of the continuum a system of coordinates in which the g mu v and their first differential quotients are continuous and differentiable. But it is also necessary that the determinant g shall nowhere vanish. This last restriction disappears, however, if one replaces the differential equations r something equals 0 by g squared r something equals 0. The left-hand sides of which are whole rational functions of the g something and their derivatives. These equations have the centrally geometric solution given by Schwarzschild. ds squared equals negative 1 over 1 minus 2m divided by r times dr squared minus r squared times, in parentheses, d zero squared equals sine squared 0 d psi squared parentheses plus parenthesis 1 minus 2m over r parenthesis times dt squared. This solution has the singularity at r equals 2m, since the coefficient of dr squared, i.e. g11, becomes infinite on this hypersurface. If, however, we replace the variable r by p, defined by the equation p squared equals r minus 2m, we obtain ds squared equals -4 in parentheses times 2m plus p squared parentheses times dp squared minus parenthesis 2m plus p squared parenthesis squared times parenthesis d0 squared plus sine squared 0d psi squared parenthesis plus p squared over 2m plus p squared times dt squared. This solution behaves regularly for all values of p. The vanishing of the coefficient of dt squared, i.e. G44 for p equals 0 results. It is true in the consequence that the determinant g vanishes for the value, but with the methods of writing in the field equations actually adopted, this does not constitute a singularity. And p varies from negative infinity to positive infinity. Then r varies from positive infinity to r equals 2m and then back to positive infinity, whilst for such values of r as correspond to r is less than 2m, there are no corresponding real values of p. Hence, the Schwarzschild solution becomes a regular solution by representing the physical space as consisting of two identical sheets in contact along the hypersurface p equals 0, i.e. r equals 2m, on which the determinant g vanishes. Let us call such a connection between the two identical sheets a bridge. Hence, the existence of such a bridge between the two sheets in the finite realm corresponds to the existence of a material neutral particle which is described in a manner free from singularities. The solution of the problem of the motion of the neutral particles evidently amounts to the discovery of such solutions as the gravitational equations written free of denominators as contain several bridges. The conception sketched above corresponds a priori to the atomistic structure of matter insofar as the bridge is by its nature a discrete element. However, we see that the mass constant m of the neutral particles must necessarily be positive, since no solution free of singularities can correspond to the Schwarzschild solution for a negative value of m. Only the examination of the several bridge problem can show whether or not this theoretical method furnishes an explanation of the empirically demonstrated equality of the masses of the particles found in nature, and when it takes into account the facts which the quantum mechanics has so wonderfully comprehended. In the an, an, uh, an analogous manner, it is possible to demonstrate that the combined equations of gravitation and electricity, with appropriate choice of the sign of electrical member in the gravitational equations, produce a singularity-free bridge representation of the electrical corpuscle. The simplest solution of this kind is that for an electrical particle without gravitational mass, so long as the considerable mathematical difficulties concerned with the solution of the several bridge problem are not overcome, nothing can be said concerning the usefulness of the theory from the physicist's point of view. However, it constitutes a matter of fact the first attempt toward the consistent elaboration of a field theory which presents a possibility of explaining the properties of matter. In favor of this attempt, one should also add that it is based on the simplest possible relativistic field equations known today. Summary: physics constitutes a logical system of thought which is in a state of evolution, whose basis cannot be distilled, as it were, from experience by the inductive method, but can only be arrived at by free invention. The justification, truth content of the system rests in the verification of the derived propositions by sense experiences, whereby the relations of the latter to the former can only be comprehended intuitively. Evolution is proceeding in this direction by increasing simplicity of the logical basis. In order further to approach this goal, we must resign to the fact that the logical basis departs more and more from the facts of experience, and that the path of our thought from the fundamental basis to those derived propositions which correlate with sense experiences becomes continually harder and longer. Our aim has been a sketch as briefly as briefly as possible the development of the fundamental concepts in their dependence upon the facts of experience and upon the endeavor to achieve internal perfection of the system. The considerations were intended to illuminate the present state of affairs as it appears to me. It is unavoidable that a schematic historic exposition is subjectively colored. I try to demonstrate how the concepts of bodily objects, space, subjective and objective time are connected with one another and with the nature of our experience. In classical mechanics, the concepts of space and time become independent. The concept of the bodily object is replaced in the foundations by the concept of the material point, by which means mechanics becomes fundamentally atomistic. Light and electricity produce insurmountable difficulties when one attempts to make mechanics the basis of all physics. We are thus led to the field theory of electricity, and later on to the attempt to base physics entirely upon the concept of the field after an attempted compromise with classical mechanics. This attempt leads to the theory of relativity, evolution of the notion of space and time into that of the continuum with metric structure. I try to demonstrate furthermore why, in my opinion, quantum theory does not seem capable to furnish an adequate foundation for physics. One becomes involved in contradictions if one tries to consider the theoretical quantum description as a complete description of the individual physical system or event. On the other hand, the field theory is as yet unable to explain the molecular structure of matter and of quantum phenomena. It is shown, however, that the conviction of the inability of field theory to solve these problems by the methods rests upon prejudice. So yeah, that is the end of the part called Physics and Reality. Einstein finishing up talking about physics and the use of whether it's better to use mechanics or field theory to better understand physics. Not everything can be measured the same, essentially. But yeah, as always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.